Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you're having good luck with your gardening and all of your projects. And without further ado, let's get to today's project. It's a very heavy one. Right?
Right.
Cut her off guard. Alright, so we've been building these gabions, however you want to say it. I'm not sure what the correct way is. I'm sure the armchair experts will tell me in the comments. But we're building some gabion boxes for the father-in-law, and we're making them 8 foot long, sort of like this guy over here. This is one I was trying to experiment with by bending it by hand. But basically what I was doing is I was cutting out the shapes, putting the sides up the 90 degrees and welding them back together. And after a while I was like, this is silly. I'm just cutting this and welding it right back together. I thought, well, what if I could just bend these? So I got some scrap metal. I got a lot of scrap metal. We've got this 4-inch angle iron here. We're building a brake, but I'm having an issue with the hinges because I've never built hinges before, and evidently I don't understand how they work. And I kind of do now. After using the facilities yesterday, I was looking at the door hinges, which I should have done to begin with to get an idea on how a hinge works. As you can see my mistakes here. I cut this out, had this welded in here, it didn't work. And then I did the same thing over here and welded it in, which is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. That didn't work either. So now I realize this hinge needs to go either in between these two pieces of metal or on the back side underneath here, not inside, recessed into the metal. Because, I mean, it does work, but the problem is, as you can see, it overlaps. It doesn't bend at the hinge point. It overlaps about an inch. So see that space there? It's about an inch and a half. And as I lift this up, it covers that whole space. What I want it to do is from this corner to this corner, I want it to bend there and bend straight up, not go and then up like it's doing. It doesn't make that sound too up. And we got a 1-inch thick piece of rebar welded on as a handle. And yeah, so what we're going to do is cut these off and redo it again for like the 8th time, because I've done this many times yesterday. But I think I got my mind wrapped around how this is supposed to work now, so we'll be able to do that today. And big shout out to my neighbor Brad and Nina. Thank you for the metal. The missus and I went and collected some steel from them yesterday, and I've been able to use some of that. And some of the metal looks like it was from a metal brake or some kind of metal cutting device. You got these pieces here with the square holes in them. You can see the beveled edge on there. We've got some much larger pieces here. These are about 6 feet long, but they taper in, so I'm not sure what that's all about. We may reuse these and utilize this again. It looks like this piece came off of this piece maybe, so maybe we can weld these back together and make a longer piece. I don't know. Otherwise maybe these were replaceable teeth from like an earth mover or something. And then we've got these 1/2-inch thick that looks like a 6x3 angle iron there, and then you can see there's some beveled holes in there where like a bolt would go, and then a nut on the other side. So I'm sure these were some kind of tooling for something. And then we also got this little piece of railroad track. It's about 2.5 feet long. That might make an interesting anvil. Something to play around with later after I'm done with the projects that I'm working on, because I've got a project and then I'm working on a project and then I deviate and start another one and then another one and then another one. And meanwhile, none of them are finished. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to cut those off, replace those, and once I get that figured out, then we'll go ahead and work on the clamp part that'll go on top of here to hold the metal down. Right now we've got this little 2-inch angle iron on there with some C-clamps, which will probably work, but I would like to do like some bolts and wing nuts on there to make it a little easier to replace, because the C-clamps are it's kind of a pain to fiddle with those and get those to clamp down. I think some heavy duty bolts, maybe some all thread and some bolts, will make it a little easier. Now, off subject. So we finally got one of the batteries fully top balanced. But I'm having an issue with these Seplos BMS. I still can't get anything to communicate with them to change the settings. Now, my thinking is I'm using the wrong Cat 5 cable. I'm trying to use this battery communication cable that goes to the inverter, but it may have a different pinout than what is necessary for a computer communication. So I know it plugs into here, the CAN bus, because these are for in and outputs for other battery banks. Because we got this fully charged, and when I hooked it back up to the Suplos BMS, it will only charge this. It will only charge up to 200 amp hours. So there's the maximum stated charge, 200. Right now, it's almost to almost to 100% now. And once this is done charging, normally what it would do is it would shut the inverter off and stop charging the rest of the batteries, even though the rest of the batteries are not at that same state of charge and still have a long ways to go. So I'm gonna probably today or tomorrow experiment with some other Cat 5 cables that I've got laying around. Maybe they'll work. I have the app. I contacted Suplos and got the app, but the app will not communicate with the Bluetooth on the BMS. And I know this BMS has a Bluetooth because the screen has the Bluetooth module on the back side of it. We got another one right here. Maybe you can see it. It's that right there, that little silver box right there with the QR code on it. It's not going to focus, but that's the Bluetooth module. I know the older ones don't have that. So I'm not sure why the Bluetooth is not working. Maybe I've got the wrong version or something, or I simply am overlooking a simple setting, which is very very me. It's something I would totally do. And then another issue we're having is I can't get my battery tester to communicate with the computer either, because my computer is too new, even though it's 6 years old. Because this is about a 40 amp charger if you use this to charge your batteries, versus this little tiny thing, and it's only 4 amps. So it takes about 2 days to charge one cell. So it takes about a month, 32 days or so, to charge all the cells. Now, some of the cells are at a different state of charge and may charge a lot faster, because when I had this hooked up to the BMS, you know, the difference in between the cells was pretty great. It's like 200 and something milliamps. So there may be a couple of cells in here that'll charge in a couple hours, and then the rest will just take 2 days. Originally, when I was trying to do this, I thought there was something wrong. But you just need to be patient and wait, because there's a very flat line on the graph when it comes to the state of charge on these guys. So that flat line just keeps going and going and going and going, and then at the very end it'll start to go back up again, and then you'll get a fully charged battery. And then you have to keep you have to keep an eye on this, because this will change the voltage. You know, even though you're not touching it, see that it'll move around, and you might come out here tomorrow and it'll say 3.75. So I just have to keep an eye on that. It won't hurt the batteries if I charge them up to 3.75 once or twice. We don't want to keep doing that. But once I get all the batteries up to 3.65 volts, we'll connect them all together in parallel. We'll let them sit for a few days and absorb, and then we'll hook the charger up and then bring them all up together to 3.65 volts. And once that has been completed, we'll hook the BMS back up. So I'm probably going to hook the Overkill Solar BMSs back up, because I can't change the settings on these Suplos. But like I said, I'm going to mess around with some other Ethernet cables, and maybe it's just a different pinout. And let me show you something else that's going on when I have the communication hooked up to the inverter. I will show you guys. We go to alarms. So we get an M3TX failure over and over and over and over again. And once that occurs, it turns off the inverter and turns it back on. And my thinking is that the inverter is set to 280 amp hours. Suplos BMS 200. So when the Suplos BMS reaches 200, it shuts off the charging, therefore causing a fault in the inverter, because the inverter is trying to push 280 amp hours. So we get a fault code, and it seems like every time I plug that in and hook it up, it will do that about twice a day. And you can see there, look at the dates and the times. It'll literally shut the power off and turn back on, so it resets the inverter charge controller. And since I have that disconnected, it's not doing that any longer. So we just have it set back to lead acid battery, and I know it's not showing the exact voltage or the percentage, but we can still see how much power is coming in as the the cooling fans finally shut off. So what happens is a cloud will go overhead, and then the cloud will go away, and then the cooling fans kick on to get rid of some of the extra heat because the voltage changes going from charging and then for output. So most of the time it's silent, it doesn't make any noise, but when a cloud passes by and then goes away, we have that jump in voltage, and then some of the extra power is turned into heat and then exhausted out the top. Okay, now enough of my confusing rambling and complaining. Even if I leave these things the way they are and I let this only charge up to 200 amp hours, we still have more than enough power to run everything. We could still run air conditioning all night long and a freeze dryer all night long and all day long, no problem. I would just like to be able to utilize the full capacity of the batteries, or at least, more than what we're using right now. So it's just, I'm sure after a while it will cause a problem having one battery bank charging up to 200 and then the rest charging up to 280. So I just want everything to be equal, and I want it to be perfect. I want it to work the way it's supposed to. So enough of me rambling. On a side note, if you guys have some extra time, maybe put some time aside tonight. Maybe offer a little prayer for our fellow Americans on the East Coast. The government's not helping out over there, and the Americans that live nearby are helping each other out, which that's what we do. We help each other out. But some of them they've lost everything, and it's horrifying. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, pop those down below. Give us a thumbs up. And as always, keep building. Try to be good to each other. Some of us aren't here for very long. A little bit of kindness will go a long ways. So God bless you all, and peace.